listening to Season 1, Episode 6 of the Potomac RPG Podcast. Honestly, could you please put some pants on during our video session? It's unseemly.
Welcome one and all to the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I am your host and improved initiative tracker, Adam.
I'm your digital token, Thom.
And I'm your questionable dice bot, Anthony.
Guys, thanks so much for being on the show today. Great to have you here. You know, honestly, with everything going on in the country right now, it's difficult to even think about gaming. I know in terms of writing out this episode through the week, not a lot of motivation. Things are pretty bad out there, and obviously, the hope is that we'll come together as a country, get through this, and have a better country after all this is over. In the meantime, we keep rolling forward and doing our thing, and that's what we're here to do today. So yeah, it might not matter much in the grand scheme of things, but we just keep moving forward with what we're doing as a bit of an escape from how horrible things are out there right now. All right, so let's introduce this week's topic. We're still in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, along with everything else going on right now. And even though things are starting to open up, it'll likely be some time until in-person groups can start again. And even after we do that, there's no guarantee we won't get locked down again. So everything's still digital for the foreseeable future. So this week, we're going to talk about online tools, things that we can use to make our online games easier and more enjoyable. Now we've been playing online since the lockdown started. Anthony, how do you think it compares to in real life gaming?
Well, obviously it's nice seeing everybody in person and having taco nights and that kind of stuff live, and you get all the simultaneous banter that's a little bit harder to do on Zoom, because usually once you have two people talking at the same time, you just can't hear anybody. And then when you have large groups like ours with 8 people, it's hard to keep 8 people staring at a screen for 4 hours without at least one or more people wandering off.
Yeah,
and that's kind
for
of just,
sure.
Yeah.
Thom, how about you? How are you feeling about the online gaming experience?
Well, for me personally, because I just recently started DMing a little bit here and there to get my feet wet into it, and just how I operate, I like running games. I've never run a game in real IRL, but I feel like running a game digitally is so much easier for me. But I know there are things where it's so much more complicated to do even simple tasks because you're trying to do them over digital.
Yeah, I mean, both have their advantages and disadvantages. I know as a mostly player side of things, and a bit of an older guy myself, I enjoy the in-person gaming just because I like to see people. I mean, for a lot of us, this is our social time. This is our chance to be around friends for game night. So being online is a Band-Aid in my mind, but there are easier things. No drive, no need to kind of travel anywhere or even change. You can just plop down in front of your computer whenever and pick it up. But I'm personally looking forward to the end of lockdown, so I can get out and see you guys again here soon. There's not quite a comparison between the two, but we're making the best of it, and it's going well for what it is, and that's part of what we're getting into is just how to make that online experience get better, more efficient, more enjoyable for everyone until the lockdown's lifted. So let's get into some questions here. The first question we have from Reddit is from user Kyle IM1320, who asks, collaborative online whiteboard. For the first time, I'm running an evil campaign for my players. Usually our D&D campaigns are super decentralized and the players are wandering and adventuring hobos. But this time we all thought it would be cool to have a central little town for the players' evil headquarters to be. they're running a church for a demon they're trying to summon. Nice. Since the town is going to be such a big part of the campaign, I ran the idea of possibly having us all do some collaborative world building and literally drawing up the town on a map together. They loved the idea, but this was a while ago, and now we have to run our campaigns over Discord. Do any of you know an application where it could simply just be a whiteboard where 4 to 6 people could simultaneously draw at once on it? Doesn't need to be super advanced. After we do a rough sketch of everything we want to do in the town, I'll probably redo it in Incarnate, but any suggestions would be greatly appreciated. But we all know exactly what we're going to suggest here since we've been using it since the pandemic started. So Thom, why don't you start us out on this one? What can Kyle IM use?
So, and Anthony actually started this with his campaign, is Miro, Miro, whiteboard application. It's free to use. Everything you would need. You can have up to 3 whiteboards, and I even have a couple more with an alternate email address just to keep them all separate so people don't see what's behind the curtain. But you can do a subscription and have a lot more tools. I love it as a fledgling, be more like a hatchling DM trying to do online games. It is so user friendly. Like I can images, tokens, anything, I can drag and drop things in really easily. I don't know if it's infinite in its size, but it can scale to hold a lot of information.
Yeah, it's shocking just how much you can fit on this whiteboard. And I like when you're zooming in to like 1%, just to be able to see the map at full screen, that gives you an idea of how big, whenever it pulls back to 100%, how big this whiteboard can get.
And I've even tried like seeing if I could make it bigger. And if I take 2 objects, like 2 images, and try to drag them in opposite corners, they keep going. So I believe it is mostly infinite within relative to what's on the board.
Wow.
I'm sure there's some limitation, but I haven't found it yet.
Yeah. Well,
It's really nice because it's really user friendly, and it's just kind of like your Google applications, like your Google documents, stuff like that, where multiple people can sign in and rearrange things and make their own images or put their own images in, type their own text boxes, move their own tokens, which is amazing because I can just slap a battle map up, drag in tokens in, and people can move their own tokens around as they see fit. And it's really, really user friendly.
Absolutely. Now, Anthony, you were the one who kind of introduced us to Miro. What are some of the things that drew you to using this application to begin with?
Yeah, the most simple feature is just to be able to copy an image and just simply paste it. That makes it a lot easier to load up images, because when you have a ton of them, you don't want to have to deal with searching your hard drive for them and uploading and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that was a key feature. And then just the ability for everyone to even see where each other's cursors are very helpful. So it just has a lot of nice user intuitive features.
Yeah, there's an amazing, it's amazingly simple, but able to handle a lot of different things. Like, I mean, for example, when we're in the middle of a battle map, moving stuff around, the ability to, link 2 objects together and kind of merge them so they move as one. So, for example, last night, Thom, you were putting on conditions onto enemies and PCs, and you basically merge them together so it's one, but you can still unmerge them after, correct?
Yeah, it's very, very simple. Once you know how everything works, it's just a matter of right clicking and selecting the right option, or control clicking, doing your quick commands, control paste or control cut, control copy to move things around to just do that shorthand. But yeah, you can easily deselect things, layer things, put things behind other things, and even just like if you're building a map, like, okay, I have the map up, I want to do Fog of War, I make a white text box, I make it on top, I drag it over the spot I want to cover, and go from there.
Yeah, and it's amazing, all the little things that you don't even notice until it kind of pops up, like just the layer thing. I mean, how many other programs forget about being able to send things backwards and forwards in the layers, and you end up having to like delete stuff and paste them in a certain order just so it'll stack on top of itself correctly. I mean, and the most amazing thing about it is it has nothing to do with tabletop role playing. Like, this is meant for business. This is meant as a whiteboard for business, and they're advertised as such. And I haven't seen a lot of talk. I don't know if you guys have online about it being used for things like D&D and other tabletop role-playing games. I've seen it, here and there, but certainly not as much as things like, Roll20 or those dedicated TTRPG applications. Anthony, have you seen it being used in this kind of way very often online?
No, I'm actually just stumbled on it by accident when we had to huddle in our shelters. So maybe it'll start to spread a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that it does, because we've talked before about our kind of mixed opinion over Roll20, given the learning curve of it and how much stuff basically is in it that can be a little cumbersome. So this is kind of the exact opposite. Like, it really is as simple as you said, Thom, where it's almost like you're opening up a document online and people are just able to move stuff around, throw stuff in there, on the fly. And it really, really works well. I mean, last night, for example, we didn't have a battle map ready for a certain location. And it took us literally 10 seconds finding something online that kind of fit and pasting it right in. And boom, we had a battle map. We had our tokens. We were moving stuff around. It's really a pretty extraordinary piece of software, and it's all through the browser. Like, you don't need a downloadable program or anything like that. Now, have either of you tried it on mobile?
I tried reading it on mobile, but it's really hard. Like, on my phone or on like a tablet, I've tried messing with it, but it's not as there are like touchscreen controls and everything, but I'm much more comfortable with a mouse personally.
Yeah. It's very hard to use without a mouse. I mean, it kind of goes with any whiteboard just because navigating is tough. Like trying to do Photoshop without a mouse. Good luck. So,
yeah. For sure. So, well, if you guys, if anyone out there has not heard of Miro before, highly recommend checking it out. Now, just to kind of round this out, Anthony and Thom, have you guys noticed any drawbacks to Miro? Anything that doesn't quite, work too well?
No, honestly, I mean, there's almost no load time. That's reasonable. It's got pretty much every feature I would reasonably want. I mean, there might be a concept of like trays for icons, but I think that's there. I just don't use it. There's even the ability to load a URL and it becomes an object, and you can press a single button to refresh it. So if you wanted to throw a character sheet up there, you could actually have your character sheet on the board and just refresh it. Or if you're using improved initiative or something later for like initiative tracking, you can just refresh that.
Wow, I didn't know it could do that. Thom, any drawbacks on your end?
So for me, and this is more of a fact that it's a business tool, not a D&D tool. It does have, at least from my experience, some issues with the overlays becoming visible. So like if I have a dungeon where I've hidden tokens underneath the map, and I'm going to send the map back to have them pop up, or I have something covering it. When you move assets around, when you drag assets around on the map, sometimes it will make everything transparent temporarily so people can get glimpses. And there's even just in the top right corner, there's the search bar. If you click on that, everything becomes transparent, which I found is helpful as a DM if I'm moving things around and I'm like, oh, where was which of these covered things is what I'm looking for. But anybody can do that, and if it's easily accidentally done, especially again with the movement, like I've had issues with I go to move something to move fog or war out of the way, and it becomes the thing I'm moving becomes transparent to everyone else, and they're like, oh yeah, there's like six enemies under there. I found a quick workaround with that. With the layering, is the assets are transparent to a certain opaqueness. So if you just make like, I think the limit is 4 or 5 like text boxes of any color, and overlay them and link them together as to one object, then the transparency is basically stacked so much that you can't see through it. Like wearing like 6 pairs of sunglasses, you can't see through them after a while. And the beautiful thing with Miro that I really do appreciate is it kind of you can copy and paste anything. So once I make one of those templates where it's a little bit tedious because you have to like make them all and then line them up on top of each other while they're all selected, which it's really easy if you kind of know what you're doing and you can do the right menu options. But once you make that and link that item together into one grouped object, and then you can copy and paste that as many times as you want. So you just have your one template that you copy and paste and drag around the entire map.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
So I've started using that with my stuff. Like, I have my transparent ones, and then I have my non-transparent ones.
And there's also, other workarounds that I've seen you guys do, such as, not populating what's under there until it's revealed. And, even in cases of making multiple text boxes that way, like you can remove just one at a time. So you're not removing quite so many, and that transparency isn't hitting the entirety of what's underneath. So there's some workarounds to it. Like you said, it wasn't built for D&D, but certainly has proven useful. I think the only thing that I'm curious about, and I don't know if it is a possibility and I haven't figured it out, but video of any kind. Because I would love the idea of, they have those animated battle maps. The ability to bring in one of those. I don't think that's a feature right now. I don't think you can do video.
No, actually, if you paste in a YouTube video, it does, and you can hit a play icon and it plays. So I didn't even think about an animated map, but you could certainly do that.
Well,
yeah, I know GIFs can run on loop perpetually. It's GIF, not GIF. Can run perpetually on loop, but and you can play them. But yeah, I wasn't sure about videos. Yeah,
I'm not sure if you can access the loop function on a YouTube video or not, but certainly worth a try. And I think we're going to end up trying that. Now, just so everyone knows, that you can pay for Miro. It's like an upgraded version of it that allows things like can't you like restrict access and stuff like that with some of those bigger ones?
Yeah, once you pay, then you get a lot more persistence, which, doesn't provide... It depends on what your setting is. If you're playing something persistent, you might want it. But in general, we've been okay with 3. But you just get more... You get more business features, really, like Jira integration and other stuff.
And for me, I've had issues with... Because I need to keep everything organized. And having it... I basically have two duplicate boards. I have a board that my players play on. And then I have my, idea board that has this very similar, and I'll kind of build maps and lay out ideas and kind of plan things beforehand as my storyboard. But I've learned that if players access my board, but then they back out to the main hub, they can access any board. So that's one thing I did is I did have a backup email address because I was one that I'm playing with you guys, and then when I'm playing with as a DM myself. So to keep it all straight, I have two separate emails for two separate accounts, and I try to keep my storyboard on one, and then my ones that my players are on another, just to keep it straight. But yeah, the full upgrade, you can have as many boards as you want, and you can have you can make some private so people can't just accidentally stumble on your plots and behind your DM screen.
Well, if anyone's interested, that's at Miro.com. That's Miro.com. Definitely worth looking at and checking out and seeing if it works for you. All right, so D&D Beyond released an article a couple days ago, and it's titled New Player's Guide, How to Make Awesome Handouts. It's written by James, I think it's Hake. I believe that's the way that you pronounce that. This is part of their New Player's Guide, and this one is all about handouts. I thought it was an interesting topic to dive into. The author writes about ways that handouts can be useful and how much fun they can be. In particular, he writes about his players going to a monastery to research a carrion crawler. Then he gives the players a handout that looks like it's written by a scholar. It's pretty cool. Then he does a bit of a walkthrough using Word and GIMP within the article to create that handout. It's a decent little guide, but I'm curious what you guys think in general about handouts. Anthony, you've used handouts in some of your adventures. What's your take on the use of handouts in gaming?
Yeah, I'm pretty pro handout. I do a lot of secret information, but even since our session 1 of the first episode, usually with our backstories, I kind of did a lot of tie-ins to each other, and handouts are a little more challenging in live play. That's one advantage that we've had on Zoom, is that as we're going through, I could be secret messaging people about their observations, and everyone can have a different experience. Like when you were in a graveyard, for example, each of you were seeing different things. You can even get closer to having sessions where the DM really doesn't need to talk much at all. Everyone is basically just reporting their secret observations that the DM is reporting to them. So it's a different kind of experience.
For sure. Now, I remember we used handouts a good bit in season 1, and it kind of changed format a little bit. Like, for example, that very first couple sessions we had literal printed out letters and a message board kind of thing, or a notice board of different things and advertisements. Now it seems to be shifting a bit more towards plot points or information based. Why do you think that transition took place?
Well, in our group, I mean, we're running every week, so it's hard to keep up with that level of details unless this is pretty much all you do all day long. So it is very cool to have nice looking handouts. I don't know if I can afford to spend 3 or 4 hours on one particular handout when I've got also to write an episode for the next week. So, or at least design all the plot stuff.
Thom, what do you think on handouts? What's your opinion?
I think that handouts, they're really cool when you have them done. Like, again, looking at the description, having a good font, having a cool background. Like, it's really cool to have, you get into the boss's lair and you find a secret note, and it actually is like really cool, like parchment looking background with good text and everything like that. And you don't have to like describe it to them and it gives it away. It's just, here's what they have. Here's the information they have. And it kind of, it almost is a Easter egg in itself, and the players can because normally when you have to theater the mind or do battle maps and everything, there's kind of that disjoint of, if something is described, roll a perception check. Now I know I'm supposed to be looking for something. Kind of, it pulls back the curtain. But when you can do assets like that, digitally or in person, or like handouts, where you can just give them the information directly and they can hold it tangibly and work with it from there, I think that's just a really cool element that, even just a little bit is very, very fun.
Yeah, I think it depends on kind of the usefulness of the handout. Like you said, Anthony, early on with some of the stuff that we were creating handouts for, it was fun, but it took a lot of time, and like there wasn't really a long-lasting impact because it wasn't really portraying a whole lot of information, as opposed to the handouts that we kind of make use of now. And I think that's where, with this article, this handout was based around providing information on carry-in crawlers, like where they usually are, the type of damage or that they can do and stuff like that. So it was almost like a cheat sheet in a way. And I like the idea of being able to hand out things to players that they can use multiple times down the road, and might even be able to find information on there that that they hadn't run into yet, and that doesn't pop up again until later in the story. And so I think a lot of it might be based on just, what can you use?
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of it, it's kind of like return on investment. It's like if you're writing something that is like an enigma that they're going to have to solve for the next 12 episodes, then yeah, sure, put some time into it. If it's something that they're going to read and basically throw away, then you try and do that in 10, 15 minutes. We did the Fae Fair not too long ago, which was this kind of elaborate cardboard cutout thing. And so we're planning to run that for, it took me a month to put all that together.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But
of course, the pandemic hit right in the middle of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So we got to see it and set it up, and then we put it all in a box, and now it's gone. Yeah. So, but
that being said, Anthony, player to DM, some of the assets are really, really cool. And I had like a kind of a moment, like when I would, when we were on the ship coming to the Fae Fair, and I found the poster board, or the on the board I found the ticket, and it's like, oh, a ticket for the balloon ride. And it's like, okay, I have that, whatever. And normally in a D&D game, it's like, oh, I got an item, da, 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 da. And then you get, or that's actually not the right one. I'm sure be doing the Zelda sound, but you write it down in your book, and you forget about it henceforth. But since I had a physical ticket, when we did go to the Fae Fair, and I rolled out my dice out of my dice bag, and this ticket fell out, and I'm like, oh yeah, I have this. Let's use it. Yeah. So it's actually kind of cool having some even small things. Again, like you said, if you use it, if it's something that's going to be kind of forgotten about or thrown away after one use, then yeah, don't do a lot to it. But having even a small physical token of some kind, even like a POG chip or something like that you can have as a reminder, it brings it back, and it's not just lost in the paperwork.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. And we had two characters fighting over a dagger. Probably should give them like a little dagger token or some little toy dagger to haggle over.
And I think that does make a difference. Having that physical piece of something was pretty intuitive in terms of reminding you that you have it, because we're deluged with information throughout a campaign. So sometimes it's hard to not only keep track, but even just remember that you had something, and having something physical certainly helped. Now, of course, we're in a digital space, so we're talking about, kind of a picture, if you will. But even in that kind of scenario, depending on what it is, it can be a bit more forefront in your mind. But like both of you said, it's a return on investment. These things do take time, even if you're good at Photoshop or whatever. It's still time spent on something, and if it's simply a flavor of something, then yeah, it's cool for that 30 seconds that we see it, but then after that we kind of forget it. So I would highly recommend for any DMs out there that if you're going to make use of handouts, you definitely should, but have it be something that can be used by the player either sporadically throughout or somewhere down the line to make it worth the time and effort that you're putting into it.
Yeah. And it almost brings to mind season 2. Almost took handouts to an extreme. We experimented with the paper doll characters.
You don't say.
Almost.
Almost. Yeah, we made little item cards for everything, and so I made it to where I could dynamically print them from Excel, and it was kind of cool that I could give you like a paper club or pretty much anything you would find, but just maintaining that, keeping up that was just a bit much.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the information problem. Once you have too much of something or enough of something, then it's the same as if someone's talking to you about something, it kind of gets lost in the mix. So if you have just a few handouts that are of certain import, that makes them a bit more front and center. But when we were having those paper doll inventory kind of setup, it was great, it looked cool, but it all just started to blend and blur together after a time, and you ran into the same problem of forgetting what you had and where, and
exactly.
Which slot did I put it in, and all that kind of stuff. So it was a good experiment. I like that, but I think we realized that there's a middle ground in there somewhere of the use of handouts, physical items or otherwise, that kind of gets you the biggest bang for your buck. So if you're out there and you're going to make handouts, great, go for it. Just make sure it's worth the time that you're putting into it, and that the players can use it beyond that first 30 seconds. So with that, we're going to take a break real quick. We're going to step out, but we will be right back. Let me tell you a little bit about Found Familiar. They have some of the absolute best coffee around, and it caters to people just like us, people who love D&D. So try some today. You won't be disappointed. If you're looking for a recommendation, try their regular Knoll Modern Espresso. No trouble perking up at the table after drinking this stuff. Enter the coupon code Potomac RPG, all one word, at checkout and get yourself a 10% discount as well. That's foundfamiliar.com. And with that, let's get back to the show. How about another question here? This comes from Reddit user Findies, who asks, DM seeking online resources. I am a DM returning to the craft. D&D has been in my veins since the 80s. I am going to start off running 5th edition D&D. In short, I am going to DM several different campaigns online and in person. Fantasy Grounds and maybe Roll20 too. I have been away from D&D since 2008-ish, and I feel a bit anachronistic and overwhelmed at the wealth of digital information available. I've collected the books and resources as well. I want to humbly ask the community for your recommendations on online resources, wikis, SRDs, rules, tables, e-tools, generators for names, ideas, well, honestly, any generators you find useful, a persistent thread or post somewhere here or elsewhere that already posed this question that I may have overlooked. Any advice you might have for me is also welcome. I looked through persistent threads and the amount of information is near overwhelming. I felt myself and maybe others could benefit from a collection of your favorite online resources that you use and would recommend to this pen and paper DM pivoting into the electronic age. Thank you for your help and consideration, DMs, players, and aspiring DMs of our beloved hobby. So, Thom, you've been diving into this stuff a lot lately, especially the last couple months. What do you have to offer our friend Findies?
Well, again, because I mentioned Miro and everything like that, and in using a lot of existing assets, because I'm not as familiar with Roll20, where they probably have pre-generated assets. One kind of a gem that I didn't expect is Pinterest. So a lot of times when I'm looking up, character art or battle maps that I want to drag and drop in something, pictures for NPCs or anything like that. And I'm doing the whole Google image search. And a lot of the time I'm coming into Pinterest through that. And, it's like after a while, I'm like, I'm just going to get a Pinterest account and see what happens. I get daily emails with about 15 battle maps. And I'm like, I want that one and that one and that one and that one. And I've created a whole catalog of assets that I can use. And I'm like, and even like just general inspiration of, oh my gosh, this could be a great boss at some point. I can tweak this and I can make that from there. Other things that I've come across are this go back a little bit to the handout, but DM's Tavern is a website, actually has printable spell cards. So if you do have players digitally that they don't necessarily have D&D Beyond or something like that, they can make a PDF or even print off their own spell cards to have and organize a bit better than what they might have available. In terms of hard copies.
Sure.
But yeah, a lot of it's just Google. Google is your friend in finding different assets. In terms of like the name generators, I've looked at name generators. A lot of like your top ones that you come up when you just Google them they seem very high fantasy a lot of the time, and they're just very, very bogged down, and they're not easy to read. They're very abstract. I found just looking up names of NPCs and making them yourself. Like just having a running tab of NPC names that you're like, oh, I didn't think of this person. They are now
Scullywug.
Stormwind or something like that. Like you just basically pick names like like Arengar Stormwind, and you can just throw in a name and then you check it off your list. But finding names, there are a lot of pre-made assets that people have made that you don't have to find a generator specifically for. That there are examples plenty out there, and even things like modules. Like I was the module I'm trying to run is the Lost Mines of Phandelver. The module has some things, but even just looking online, there are where people for their own campaigns have fleshed out the NPCs that there's only maybe a sentence in the module itself, but they give motivations, backstories, artwork, everything.
Yeah.
So you can actually build a lot of that up with existing stuff just by looking on, again, Reddit and Pinterest and stuff like that.
Sure. Well, Anthony, how about you? I know you have a slew of different things that you've used in your campaigns. What do you got for them?
Yeah, I've got a pretty long list, and I would preface it to say that being a DM is kind of like a character class, like being a fighter or anything else. So you're not going to start out as a DM and be as experienced as someone who's been doing it 20 years, or have the thickness of the binder of DM material, or even be as comfortable with it. Because even if you were to take their whole binder, you haven't memorized the layout and you're not as quick as traversing it as that other person. So a lot of the stuff is just start simple and just grow as you find pain points, and then you'll find things that you become attached to. There's not like one perfect setup.
Sure. Yeah.
So like on a daily basis, I use Google Drive, and I've organized all my folders by topic. Like I've got a folder for puzzles, traps, monsters, world building, NPCs, basically everything. And then I just throw all my material into those folders. I use Trello for story management. So Trello is an online card system. So basically, the current episode, I'll generally have different cards with representing scenes or things, points that I need to hit, and I'll just drag those cards around. And if things go off track, I've got some backup cards I can just drag over. Just that kind of can work anywhere. Or if we miss,
it never goes off track, right?
No, of course not. I'll try and write a plot, and then it'll take like 4 episodes to play out. That's okay. So, and then when you guys make enemies and stuff, it's like, all right, there's a new card for under your track, and I'll come back to that later. So Trello I use a lot. Zoom, Miro, Improved Initiative is how I use combat stuff. D&D Beyond has its own initiative tracker, but I would recommend Improved Initiative. D&D Beyond still has a ways to go before it catches up to Improved Initiative.
Sure.
And yeah, and then DM's Guild has a ton of stuff. So if you're running any out of the box or any official adventure like Curse of Strahd or Waterdeep Heist, there's generally companion books out there, and like Thom kind of noted, they generally flesh out the world in far more detail. So like in Waterdeep, there's an entire companion set for that like builds out more locations and more people and city specific encounters and jobs for the job board, and it just fleshes out the entire world way, like it's a whole book just about the city.
Nice. I know, I don't have as much experience on the DM side, but little things that make things easier, like a token stamp, 2.0, I believe it's called. I mean, we can bang out tokens in a couple minutes. All the tokens that you need for something, there's a lot of options on there. It's super simple to use. And you had mentioned previously, just in terms of how to present this stuff, not only with a whiteboard, but over Zoom or Discord. Discord, there's the Aviary Bot. I think I'm pronouncing that correct. Which, Anthony, what exactly does Aviary do?
It's a plugin for Discord that gives you dice bot capabilities, and you can pull down characters from D&D Beyond, and it's basically just a whole suite of RPG specific tools for Discord. And so if you wanted to attack, you can just do like exclamation AT, then hit a space, and then like the first couple of characters of what you want to attack with, and then it just automatically rolls it from your character stats and gives you a description of the weapon and everything else.
Sure. Yeah. A lot of stuff out there, and it is kind of hard to separate the wheat from the chaff. But hopefully, some of those recommendations that you guys brought up will help Findies in their search for some online tools after so many years being out of the hobby. So, best of luck, Findies. Hope you find what you're looking for, and looking forward to an exciting return to the hobby. So we're going to get into something new this week. There's a lot of different resources that we just covered that are out there, but it's time to drill down a little bit, because that digital tabletop can take many forms. So we're going to put this into action. This is the first in a sure to be long running segment. It's time for Let's Build Something. Welcome to Let's Build Something, where we get to put our creativity to the test and build something live for all the world to hear. In this week's segment, we're going to build ourselves a digital tabletop experience based on the type of group that you have. So here's how it'll work. Each of us will roll for a series of group traits. Then what we're going to do is build a digital tabletop role-playing experience specifically geared towards the type of group that we rolled. So you two ready to give it a shot?
Yeah,
sounds fun.
All right, so both of you are going to roll 5 D4s. so that we can get these traits. So go ahead and get out your dice quick. We're going to roll, and let's see what you guys come up with. All right, so you guys got your dice ready?
Yep.
All right. So Thom, you go ahead and roll first.
Okay. So I got a 4, a 1, a 1, a 2, and a 2.
All right. So you might want to write this down. So you're going to have a group of 9+ players. So good luck with that. And
I'm
your
doomed.
average internet connection is poor. Your average computer skills of your users is poor. The type of gameplay you'll be playing is heavy combat. And the money, in terms of your actual, in real life money available, is going to be not very much. They can afford, a little odd and end here, and that's about it. So you got that down?
Sure.
All right. Anthony, your game has 2 to 3 players. Your average internet connection is excellent. Your average computer skill level is excellent. Your type of gameplay is RP heavy, and the money available is as much as you want. So congratulations.
I'd rather switch with Thom.
So, and then the one that I rolled, I have a group of 6 to 8 players with excellent internet connections, excellent computer skills. It looks like a bunch of newbies. So people brand new to the hobby, and I got a decent amount of money to work with. So let's think here for a second in terms of how you're going to present this tabletop role-playing game to your players. So Thom, we're going to wind back to you. And what are you thinking right out the gate?
So not to sound like a Kenku here, but I'm going to repeat myself and probably go with Miro board, just because even if there's poor internet connection, it runs smoothly. If there's people don't have the best of tech skills, if they can operate Word or PowerPoint for the bare minimum, then they should be fine with this. And I can even train people how to do it without too much trouble. It's free, so that the money aspect, I can bring my own assets in and use a lot of available stuff. 9 players I think is the biggest challenge, especially online, just because, and I'm sure as Anthony knows, trying to manage so many people, everybody has to have their turn in the limelight. If you're going to do combat, especially if it's, again, really combat heavy, having that many people, you need to balance it. You're going to have a lot more monsters to deal with the action economy. Mm-hmm. And that's just going to slow it down. Like my one game I'm just only did one session so far with my my roommate and his buddies that we got in. So 4 people, only 4 people, and trying to do combat for them can take an hour or more. That's only 4 people, just to because you're going through all the monsters, you're going through all their turns, and you're kind of just trying to keep the pace. And even as best you can with that online, it takes a long time. Sure. So combat's going to be massive. I'm not sure exactly how I would slow that, or how I would speed that up, though.
Any other tricks you got up your sleeve for online resources with that type of group? A huge group with bad internet and bad computer skills. That's a tough one to work with.
Yeah, especially since, and this is something that I've learned, like we were saying earlier about, all of us working together on Miro to, like, someone's doing assets, someone's managing initiatives, someone's doing that. It's near impossible at this point, unless I would have to sit down and do a full, like, session 0 on working the tech first. Yeah. With them to bring them up to speed so that they could actually keep helping out with that. So, like, there's somebody running, the initiative, delegating someone running the status effects or changes in the environment, removing dead creatures, stuff like that. And then, because with that many people, you have enough heads that instead of people getting bored by just waiting, an hour for their turn to come around, they're doing other things.
Yeah, give them a job to do, right?
Yeah, give them a job to do. So like they could be creating things. And again, with the tech stuff, poor tech skills, that can be taught, that can be worked with. And it's, once you get that out of the way, then everything else should fall into place relatively easily. Again, it's still going to be a nightmare, still going to be long combats, but it could be manageable.
It'll be especially great whenever they accidentally delete all your assets that you have on your board and you're left with nothing, right?
Yeah, don't hit Control A and then delete, because you will delete everything that's not locked down.
Yeah, that would worry me considerably. Definitely want that second board to pull stuff over from in that case. But yeah, you're right in terms of looking a bit more focused on your side, the DM side, rather than things that the player has to manage on their end, like another application or something running from their user side. It sounds like you're keeping it all basically under your control, and with such a poor internet connection and poor computer skills and not a lot of money, that's probably your best bet. Anthony, let's move over to yours. You have a bit more freedom in your design. What kind of digital tabletop experience are you building?
Yeah, and the freedom is actually a little more challenging. Because when you have people with good skills and good experience and unlimited money, and they love to RP, then you've got to build a much better experience than people who are limited.
Yeah,
especially if it's 2 to 3 people, you've got a very intimate audience.
Mm-hmm.
So in that particular case, I would probably go with more of a Roll20 approach. Normally, I mean, I've been using Miro and Theater of the Mind quite a bit. But with a smaller group, you can probably get a little bit more hands-on with Roll20 because it's not practical to do that with large groups.
Yep.
And so in terms of the RP, you could set up a tavern and set up a different scene and kind of get a little bit more multimedia with it, especially, again, unlimited money. They can afford to pay for the premium stuff, and they can even afford to maybe afford the premium content and get some really nice visuals in there. So yeah, I would probably lean more towards that kind of experience. And I haven't tried Fantasy Grounds yet. I hear it's actually pretty good. It just hasn't picked up as much steam as Roll20. But it looks like similar in functionality. You can do digital tokens, dynamic lighting, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'd probably lean towards something like that, and then maybe try a campaign like Curse of Strahd or something that's a little bit more RP focused.
Sure. Well, any other bells and whistles? Come on, man. You got all the money that you could ever possibly want. What are you going to buy?
So that's just his salary.
Yeah. So the you might do some twist to where you get into the physical world. Even though you're stuck remote, the mail service still works. So there's nothing to say that you couldn't have props that you actually have shipped to the players and they don't get to unbox it till game night.
There you go. Now we're cooking with gas. Excellent. So actually mailing the handouts to them, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, not necessarily handouts. They could be props. They could be a box full of mystery boxes, and so you don't get to open it till you're queued. So you can get a little creative with that if money isn't a huge object.
Oh, and you got great internet connection and great computer skills. So things like Twitch and live streaming and stuff like that are certainly an option as well. As well as things like Sirenscape, which is very expensive, but certainly with the level of skills and the smaller player base, that might be something that you can use on top of that. Also, things like Patreon with the different things available there, where it's whether it's battle maps or the dynamic dungeons and all that stuff. I mean, there's a slew of wonderful content that's paid for through Patreon that you could access. That would really kind of, hey, why not set up lighting displays in everyone's house as well and stuff like that. I mean, let's go. Oh, and can't forget about cosplay.
Right exactly. There, yeah. So. Yeah, I was actually leaning towards saying that, depending on how crazy you want to get. And then I can imagine if someone casts a spell on you and you're asked to open a little box, you open it up and confetti explodes in your face or something like that. Just things to surprise and delight and horrify people.
Absolutely. Well, that sounds pretty cool. As for my group, mine's kind of similar to yours, Anthony. The only things I might take away are, shipping costs are pretty high. So I probably wouldn't be mailing stuff to 6 to 8 players. But the use of, something like Roll20, I'd probably still stick towards Miro myself, just for ease of use for that many players. But in terms of having a decent amount of money, I'd love to make use of voice modulators that are out there. You don't have to worry about doing an accent because there's a computer program that can make one for you. I think that'd be kind of a good purchase for my group, who has a decent amount of money to work with and a good internet connection that can handle stuff like that. A lot of those visual cues, definitely bringing in some music, whether it's from Sirenscape or some other application that might be out there. Mine's a bunch of newbies though, and that's where D&D Beyond would come in, where I would make sure everything's running through D&D Beyond, that all the resources that are needed are bought there for that campaign, that they can track it all on D&D Beyond, because that is a godsend for someone who's new to the hobby and has trouble tracking a lot of that stuff or knowing what modifiers to add, stuff like that. Buying all that content on D&D Beyond is a huge plus, especially for new players, being able to keep track of what's going on out there. So that'd probably be my build out. I don't know if you guys have any other suggestions for a group like that.
Yeah, and as a DM, since you've got the most experience, there's camera filters. Like I've been using Snap Camera, and that's where you can just if you run it before you get on your webcam. Oh, is that what that was? Snap
yes, Camera.
Snap Camera. Yes, and you can do all sorts of interesting tricks. Like we had horror faces, and if I had one I didn't get to use, it got to look like an elvish sparkly drow or sparkly elf and other things.
Nice. Well, hopefully for the listeners, that gives you an idea of some of the different options that are out there, dependent on the type of group that you have, because it does vary. I mean, you can't load out all these different options with people who either don't have the equipment or the connection or the money to make use of that kind of stuff. So it gives you a few different options depending on the type of group that you have. So hopefully that helps. We're going to jump into our last post of the week. This comes from Reddit user Thunderchunks, great name, who asks, best app for between session RP. So my group's not got the bug, and to satisfy the itch between sessions, we're looking at doing some almost play-by-post role-playing in some sort of chat app. Basically a place to role-play out what you talked about around the campfire during the last long rest, what stupid jokes the rogue and warlock made behind the paladin's back while he's trying to convert some gnomes, whatever. All the stuff that definitely is happening in everybody's headcanons, but that often gets brushed aside at the table, and it shouldn't, because it's all good stuff. The current lead contender is Slack. The threaded messaging really can't be beat. A channel for each broad category of scene, campfire, tavern, while traveling, etc., with a thread for each individual scene. However, we're broke. It's the end times, and paying for it isn't an option. Having done something like this before on a message board back in the day, I know that we'll hit that 10,000 message limit remarkably quick if the group gets into this. I've pitched using the message board attached to the game on Roll20, but it seems a bit clunky and doesn't have the convenience of being on the device in our pocket 24/7 for when inspiration for how to reveal one's edgelord backstory to the fighter in confidence strikes in the middle of the night. Is there something else with comparable features that is either free or cheaper? Some other killer chat app I'm not aware of or forgetting? Some sort of mod for Discord or the like that allows for threads? So we've definitely had some experience with this from past campaigns. Anthony, what advice do you have for Thunderchunks?
Yeah, so I mean, Slack, obviously, our season 1 was very Slack heavy. I think we probably did way more offline than online. And there was all sorts of drama and romances and all skullduggery going on in Slack.
Yeah, there was.
It was pretty insane.
Poor Finbin.
Yes. So definitely pro Slack. The 10,000 message limit, you can still use Slack fully featured, but yeah, like they mentioned, after 10,000 messages, you start to lose the history. It's more for nostalgia reasons, though. Yeah. You can still have a full experience with a rolling 10,000 limit. So it's not, to me, in my mind, that big of a deal. In our case, since I'm a developer, I actually built some Slack bots. So I built bots for NPCs and other things. So you can just basically spawn an NPC and then use them as your voice. So that's how we built a pretty full-featured world on Slack. If they were wandering through a town, I could just spawn a merchant or something like that and play as that merchant, or unruly kings and other characters. So,
or even whenever you used sub DMs as well, because we could speak in a DM voice using the code that you had put in there. Someone, it's tough work being a DM, and particularly through between sessions doing RP. If you need a DM there, basically you assigned us to DM areas where our player wasn't. That way we could, dabble in a little DMing and also relieve some of the load that you were experiencing, because we were heavy into it. Like we hit that 10,000 limit real quick.
Oh yeah. We were pushing about 5,000 messages a month, I think. So yeah, we were burned through it really quick.
Sure.
And I think wasn't 80% of that Kai?
Yes. Yeah.
But well, that brings up a good point though, because Kai was originally part of the group, and sadly he's no longer playing with us at the moment. But he was a big driver of a lot of that Slack interaction. I mean, he was on there all the time, and that's kind of where we got a lot of the motivation to do that. So a lot of it also depends on your group, because since then we've done some RP in between sessions on Slack, but certainly not to the degree that we were doing back in season 1.
Yeah, I think we were kind of talking, and it was almost like a relationship. When it was new, it was very hot and heavy, and we were doing all sorts of weird stuff all the time. Yeah. And now we're a little bit more settled in.
Yeah, we've grown up in our relationship a little bit. Exactly. We've settled in, gotten comfortable. Yeah, but
yeah, we're no longer fighting wedding dress mimics or getting drunk at bars or.
Well, I mean, we still do that on occasion, but I would recommend, though, in terms of that in between RP, I think I've noticed with our games that the RP of Campfire, for example, setting up a channel for Campfire, is tough, because unless you have somebody who really is gung ho and gets in there and starts at it, it's hard for people to know where their place is to come in. They're coming in at different times. So a recommendation I would have is break that party up a little bit. So some of the best online RP that we were doing in Slack was when, Anthony, you would split us into groups of 2 or 3, and it might be as simple as going to a shop, but it was consolidated enough that you could control it. We were, only one of, maybe 2, tops 3 players in it. So there wasn't as much of a rush to try to get in to say something before somebody else did, or we didn't feel bad if there was, an hour that passed before somebody posted, because, we were all doing stuff. So we weren't in fear of getting left behind as much. So I would definitely suggest maybe splitting them up a little bit in order to prompt the role play. If you have I can't remember how many players he had in his, but you start getting up around 5, 6 or more players. It's tough to manage that in a general scene like Campfire.
Right. Yeah, and I think at the peak of our offline RP, it was probably the town of Bleebluff, which was the Sword Coast leading provider of forks and knives and cutlery. So it was a sleepy little town that started off with a murder. But I think the key thing that made it work well is that we had a town map that had maybe 22 locations, and it was like offline. You could just say, hey, let's head over to the music shop. And then I would ping you, Adam, and say, hey, do you want to run the music shop? The owner's name there is Kinka. And then Adam from there would just run with it. He would DM that little spot. 2 characters would go in, and just who knows what would happen. They'd light the place on fire, or I don't know, come away with a girlfriend or something. Who knows?
You never know.
There was just all sorts of things happening, and the people would just, as time permitted, they would just explore different spots. And some people, we have one person that just kept getting captured repeatedly. So it's like,
Thom, what do you think? Any advice for Thunder Chunks?
Again, I'm mostly familiar with Slack, so I've seen all the good things you can do with it. And again, to be honest, with the 10,000 limit, message limit, I have very rarely gone back to anything that long ago. We originally was the nostalgia aspect, but I've very rarely tried to find something that far back, and even trying to search something that far back. There's so many characters and words in the
messages,
the hundreds of thousands of texts you've done. So even trying to do a simple I'm trying to remember. I remember I said something about this bad guy, and then you could come up with 500 results or more. And it's I don't know where that was, so I'll just go with that. So I have done a little bit in Discord. But again, there's not the thread aspect, doesn't do as much. But it can serve its purpose. It's better than, like a group text or a group email. So
agreed. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Discord either in that respect. That just for some reason Slack works a lot better. Well, I think that is going to do it for us this week. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@potomacripg.com. And if you'd like to support the Potomac RPG podcast, we are now on Ko-Fi. That's ko-fi.com/Potomac RPG. And lastly, you can follow us at Potomac_RPG on Twitter and at Potomac RPG, all one word, on Instagram and YouTube. Big thanks to Thom and Anthony for being on the show. Had a great time with you. And thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew. And of course, all of our wonderful listeners out there. So for the Potomac RPG podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Thom.
And I'm Anthony.
Till next time, keep those dice rolling. Keep those stories coming. And never stop playing. Oh, gee, guys, you could have said it a little bit louder.
So it's trying to do it with like paper, like they have their books, I have my book. I'm trying to teach them.
Sounds like a nightmare.